Hello and welcome to Opening the Gates to More Listings for Estate Agents with me, Simon Gates. I'm delighted to be joined today by Mr. Josh Phegan. Josh, thank you very much for joining me.
Simon, lovely to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's a real surreal moment for me. We're here in Wembley Stadium.
Yes.
And I've followed your content for like the last decade.
Yes.
Subscribed to your emails, listened to the podcast, and now I'm sat here interviewing you. It's crazy.
Mate, it's awesome and lovely to be here. So thanks for the opportunity.
So, I'm going to really put you on the spot here.
Yeah, sure.
You saw me speak a little bit earlier,
yes,
following your last talk.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to me about public speaking?
Not too much. I think you did a great job. The most important and foundational idea is to always make sure that when you're packaging information, how do you make it so it's really accessible for people and in a way that they can understand it, and then they feel motivated to then go and do something with it. And that's a really important foundational piece of what you did, where you're showing data and then insights, so actually understanding what to then go and do with that insight. And that's really the power of what a great estate agent does, is that they see an opportunity and they strike with it and they follow through with strategy to make sure they go to land a better quality outcome. So whether or not it's about getting properties to sell faster, whether or not it's about making sure more properties actually end up to completion, whether or not it's about the conversation of how you go to win an instruction, wherever it is in that stage of workflow, what does that insight actually give you on what you can do to tighten up to therefore make sure that you can do more transactions and earn more income.
So in terms of what you were saying there, I don't know if this is an international saying, or if it's just UK based, but you've got self-learning or shelf learning.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people come to this conference and they'll go, I made all these notes, but it will go on the shelf, I won't do anything with it. So for those listening or watching this conversation, what's like your top piece of advice to people who attend a conference and actually go and put into practice what they hear?
Well, the most important foundational idea is that ultimately, do people actually take notes? And like in the new world, should we press a button on a phone, it automatically, there's an app that will actually transcribe everything and will then give you all the takeaway points and all the dot points for what you're supposed to go to do. But whilst those tools are useful in certain parts, the reality of it is that what you're actually trying to do is, am I truly trying to get absorption? So the way that I learned how to learn was that I would read a book. As I'm reading a book, I would take a highlighter, I would actually highlight. Yeah. Once I'd then finished the book, I'd then go and I'd actually go to all of the highlights and I'd retype them all out, and then I'd put them into a notes section on my phone. And the basic idea was that maybe 3 times within a 72-hour period, I would actually have the review of that particular material. Yeah. And those things that really landed as important points would be the things I would actually go to remember. So when you think about, going to any conference or any learning experience, the most important part is that, why are you there? So what's the actual problem that you're actually trying to solve? Yeah. And what you'll find is that literally I could present the same presentation today and the same presentation in a year's time, but the same person could come into the room and take 2 completely different things from it. And it has to come to, are you actually ready for that message that's actually coming through? And as an example, when you think about how people actually learn, a lot of people connect with vision, but the tactical is not that important until the tactical is critically important. So if I came in and I said today, hey, I'm going to teach you how to get better fees in the lounge room, if you've not lost over fees for a while, you won't be that interested in what I've got to say. Yeah. But if you've just lost 10 in a row, you'll be very interested in what I've got to say because it's highly relevant. So tactical is critically important, but it's really pinpointed in coaching. Yeah. When you start to think about it though, being more visionary is a really important skill set to be able to make sure that you can connect with people. And there's a thing called format for learning. And in the format for learning, first of all, what you've got to do is you've got to engage people. So I've got to be able to make sure that literally you're there and you can I relate to this particular person? Then how do I then go to share through a story? Storytelling is a really powerful way for people to be able to relate and to connect. Yeah. And then what do I do to then get people to practice it and then finally go and do it? So when you're a platform speaker, as you were doing today, you're engaging and you're sharing, and then where the real learning actually happens is then the practicing and the doing. So I don't know if you've ever been to something like Cirque du Soleil, but you see those incredibly flexible people, and I'm like, yeah, I could do a somersault. Then I go home and I work out that I need to do a lot more to be able to do that somersault, and the professional made it look really easy. So that's a really important foundational idea, is to think about what is the particular skill that you've got to learn to develop that relates to maybe the data and the insights that then allows you to then strategically go and execute.
I think today, in terms of my presentation, there was a big focus on price reductions. So obviously from the stage perspective, we use the word reduction. In the living room, it'd be like realignment, readjustment, whatever. But I don't know if you were still in the room at that point, but price reductions is just crazy in the country at the moment. We've got stock levels the highest they've been since October 2013. It's like a 12-year high. Yet you've got agents and sellers pricing as if we're still in 2021, like market conditions. So there's price reductions happening all over the place, so I think based on what you said, it was good timing, but I spoke about that today because agents are going, yeah, there's lots of agents overvaluing. I really need help on how to explain to sellers about the importance of pricing correctly. Because you said there about, well, so if someone goes and sees you speak about fees, but their fees are really good at that point, they're kind of away with the fairies, aren't they? So
yeah, that story is not unique. Like I'm going to say, if you go to somewhere like New Zealand, that's definitely in exactly the same sorts of conditions and what you're talking about. And what I've got to say is that like the most foundational component is that like what people like you are really making transparency of that data, much more available. And the whole key thing about it is that literally, how do I know how to know? And so if I'm saying to you, okay, great, what are the conditions of the day? Now, if we're going to go to the beach, I want to just let you know, this is the high tide, this is the low tide, this is the temperature of the water, and by the way, there's sharks. Are you going to swim if there's sharks? Maybe not, right? And so off the back of that, you will make an assessment about what you'll wear, how you're going to wear it, what you're going to do, where you're going to surf, all those things, right? And the foundational idea is that how is it any different inside of a state agency? So what I want you to think about is that what actually are the conditions of the day and how will I go to adapt? Now, what you would say very, very clear is that ultimately there's a complete failure of sales process. So you're winning an instruction or winning a listing, but the way that you're pricing it and what you're doing to take it to market, you're rushing it to market for what point? Because if I'm saying to you, hey, by the way, look, I want to let you know, I went on to Rightmove, had a quick search, there are 500 houses currently available in the price point. Well, that would suggest to me there's a lot of supply.
Yeah.
Hey, there's only 2 houses available. That would suggest there's not much supply. So that's the first conversation. The secondary conversation is that then, okay, that's on the supply side. What's actually happening on the demand side? So on the demand side, what we're actually seeing is that for every 10 viewings that we get an offer. But at the moment, we're getting 1 viewing a quarter.
Yeah.
Well, that suggests that it's very, very slow on demand side. So that's why if you got to think about it, and what you do really well is that you got to have a look on the supply side. And maybe then there's a conversation around data or data insights around the demand side. And does that therefore mean that prices are going up or prices are actually going down? Now, what you see in most of the developed world, and particularly in Western nations, is that you've actually got a really significant increase in how much it's cost to borrow money. Yeah. And so what you've actually seen, in most countries it was 10, 11, 12, 13 increases in interest rates. And what that actually meant is that the actual amount to service a loan was up about 60%. Yeah. And so that's quite a lot when you start to think, how do I find 60% more income to service the same home loan? The secondary conversation is that then what you've then got to have a look at is that then what we've got to call our borrowing capacity, and that's actually significantly shifted. And in most countries, it's about a 40% reduction in how much money I can go to borrow. So, Mr. and Mrs. Owner, given that we're in a position that we're seeing the largest number of listings we've ever seen available on market, given that we're seeing that the average days on market is X, given that we're seeing this is the total number of properties currently available for sale, this is the number that are selling, therefore that gives us the total amount of time it would take to sell. It's not a market where ultimately you overprice, because the longer that you stay on the market, the more likely is you're going to sell at some level of a discount. Now, here is the list of the last 20 properties that have gone to market. Here are the 19 that have been on the market. And what we've actually seen here is that this is where they should be priced in order to go to sell. Now, the interesting foundational idea, what did you pay for the property? What have you spent on it? And what do you need to sell it for to still make sure you make money? Now, not everyone makes money on everything, but the most important foundational idea is that if you bought it at the right time, you're going to sell it at the right time. But if you bought at the top of 22 and you're selling today in 2025, and you've bought an asset class which doesn't ultimately drive a lot in terms of value or price point, then you're probably at a point that you'll be lying ball or you're going to lose money on the transaction. Now, go the alternate way. If you bought in 2018, pretty much regardless of what asset you bought, whether or not it's a 1-bedder, 2-bedder or a 5-bedder, you're going to be making money. So ultimately, what you've got to realise is that real estate is a medium to long-term asset hold as opposed to a short-term. And there are speculators that do really, really well in speculation markets. This is not a speculation market. This is actually core basic fundamentals. You don't have the government coming to you and basically giving you double for nothing. Yeah. You're not in a position that ultimately that the money's the cheapest it's ever been. Yeah. And so ultimately what you've got to realise, we now live in a very, very different world, from trade wars, the conversations around geopolitical events, to what's actually going on in election time. And what you realise very, very quickly is that none of it actually matters, because the foundational idea is that you're just getting on and you're living life. And if you go through the appropriate stages and single, and you're lucky enough to get married, and you're lucky enough to have children, and those kids grow up, and you do all of that sort of stuff, you'll go through the life cycle, and you'll naturally do 4 or 5 property transactions anyway, because of what actually happens in life. And so from that point of view, what a real estate agent's got to do is they've got to realise what are the market conditions of the day and how do I go to surf in those conditions. And what you do is that literally you're like my lifeguard who's giving me the advisory about what's actually happening in market to then allow me to go to determine strategy. Now, the idea to me about losing a listing because it's not exclusive, because it's at the end of an agency agreement and it's going to a second agent, is crazy to me, because you have a complete lack of control in re-signing an exclusive authority agreement 60 days in. And the fact that you're not having a proper conversation with your owner at week 1, 1, at week 2, at week 3, at week 4, then that's actually a bit of a problem. Now, the interesting conversation, what I would say, I come from a country where auction is done quite a bit in city environments, but in regional environments, it's all for sale. And so what you've got to realise, if 50% of properties are selling at auction in a bad market and 70% are selling at auction in a good market, what does that tell you? There's somewhere between 30 to 50% of properties that are selling in a for sale environment. And by the way, if they sell before auction, that's for sale. And if they sell after auction, that's for sale. So auction's probably only representative of, 30% of the marketplace at in any one point in time in all reality, because it is a for sale-based process. Yeah. But the reality of it is you've got a timeline and you've got a deadline. And so the more intense you are in a relationship, the shorter it is. The less the intensity, the longer it goes. So if you want to be married forever, see your wife once a month. If you want to be in a position that you don't want to be married for too long, then see her every hour. But what I'm trying to get you to think about is exactly the same when it actually comes to a seller, of how do I communicate with my seller? So if I'm sitting down with you and I say, hey, look, let's have a quick look at it. Let's have a look at your campaign. Here are the new properties that have come to market in the last 7 days. Here are the properties that have also sold in the last 7 days. Here are the 7 properties that have all had a price reduction of £50,000. No. When you start to look at that, you're thinking far out. Oh, and by the way, you've had 5 inquiries when you should have had 20. You've had 3 viewings when you should have had 20. You've had no second viewings when you should have had 3. You've had no one requesting the info pack when you should have had 2. And you've had no offers when you should have had 2. So where are we at and what should we go to do next? And that foundational idea is that literally now I'm going to give you a menu. Here are some things that we can do. We can change the marketing, we can change some method and approach, maybe EOI, do something else, or we can actually change the price itself. What are your thoughts? Now, based on that, and then you're going to give me a selection, yep, that's enough. Or, to be honest, that's not enough. You're also going to need to change price. Because the buyers are looking at Smith Street because it's better value for money, and it comes with a carport or it comes with a garage for the money. And so this is about learning that, what a lot of estate agents, and this is a global thing, it's not a UK thing in isolation, is that they're not good at actually creating tension. And now I think I'm reasonably smart at a few things. But I was watching Toy Story with my niece and nephew recently, and it was Toy Story 1, and I actually thought that Woody was going to die. Now, I'm smart enough to know that there's Toy Story 2, 3 and 4, so clearly Woody lives, right? But they create enough tension, and that tension gets motivation. And so what people are thinking about is they go, oh, well, they're going to be accepting of what you're telling me the conditions are. Whereas I'm saying, well, if they're conditions, then this is how I play the market. And they're two very different things about buying into a narrative to allow you to feel better about your lack of performance versus understanding a narrative to then determine strategy to make sure I'm more effective in markets that require me to be more effective.
Yeah, I love that. There's so much I could dissect from that, but a couple of bits that I was thinking about as you were talking. Let's imagine someone who is a seller today and they bought their home in 2021. So they're a buyer in that market. So here, record low interest rates, a stamp duty holiday, lack of stock on the market. So they've probably paid over the asking price. And then fast forward 5 years, if the estate agent's not educating enough on market condition changes, the seller has sat on the market for a month and they've gone, well, this is a bit rubbish. Why have I got no interest? And it's like the estate agent's not doing enough to explain, well, interest rates are not where they were. You've got loads of competition, and there's not any longer a stamp duty holiday. And I don't think enough of that education piece is being done by estate agents.
And the worst thing is about the timing, because where does that education actually happen? Does that actually happen at the point where I'm trying to win the instruction, or does that happen a couple of days after? So what the best agents actually do is they have a proper structured process. Yeah. So when I'm sitting there inside the lounge room, hey, what are your thoughts about where the market's at? What's your feelings on where you think things are at? What's the general mood in the UK? Is everyone like, woo? Or are they a bit more like, woo? And so if that's the feeling, then we need to be conservative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to couple buyers through, see what they have to say in relation to price, and then let's set price before we go live to market. So that's the first adjustment. Yeah. Now all of a sudden, I've got a couple of days in, I've got a couple of buyers through, some viewings, I've got an indicative idea on where they see value. I then go back in for my set to sell meeting to then go and reassess where the pricing needs to be, realign, and then I'll then go to market with the right price. And then this is the most important foundational idea. Overpriced listings help other listings to sell. And so what you've got to realise is that a listing is a liability until it's sold. And so there's a difference between crushing hopes and dreams and aspirations and being a dream killer as opposed to being a dream maker, versus the foundational idea is that literally, how do I provide you a set of information in a way that you can understand it and accept it and then feel confident to act? And this is the interesting conversation. So why did everyone buy when interest rates were going up? It's counterintuitive. Money's getting more expensive because there was capital growth. You could buy for £1 million and you could sell it for 1.3. I don't know, in different markets. So we saw these significant jumps in prices. Now, the interesting foundational idea, why does that not happen when interest rates actually go down? And unless you've been around for a while, you wouldn't have realised when interest rates last went down because it's quite a long time ago, right? And I find it hard to even remember when that was. I've got to go back to my dad and ask him about what that story is like. But the interesting foundational idea is that the reason why people don't rush back into a market when all of a sudden interest rates go down is because they're like, well, hang on a second, I've spent all my money in holding this particular loan. I'm in a position right now, I just need some breathing space. I want to go back to a restaurant as opposed to always having to go to the pub for dinner. And I want to be in a position I wouldn't mind a holiday, maybe out of the UK this time around, rather than always having to do a holiday locally because we don't have the money to do that. And so what consumers actually do is they save money because they're actually in a position that now they just want to put some money back into their bank account after what's actually gone on. Now, the interesting conversation is, if I bought a property from you today for $1 million, do you think I could still sell it for $1 million in December? And the answer to that question is not resolutely yes in most marketplaces. However, back in 21 and 22 that you reference, what would you have said then? Oh, for sure. And so therefore that's called mood. So what I got to have a quick look at, what's happening with supply, what's happening with demand, what's going on with the cost of money, what's going on with the actual conversation on how much I can borrow with borrowing capacity, and then what's the mood of the market. And so if you look at those 5 indicators, then that then allows me to be able to tell a story that you can actually buy into. And so naturally, that's why it's a really important foundational idea that where do you get your insight so you can have a better quality conversation, and when do you have the conversation to make sure that people can actually go and do something with it.
Yeah, love that. So you've taught some unbelievable gold in terms of like dialogue and a lot of that around education piece once we're in the living room and talk about coming to market. Let's just go back in time. We're not in that living room yet. I'm a brand new estate agent, Simon Gates Estate Agents in Milton Keynes, and Josh Phegan's flown in to be my coach for the day. What is Josh Phegan telling Simon Gates about launching a business? Where do I get those listings from to start with?
Well, first of all, Milton Keynes is a really unique environment. It feels like an American barnyard has been built there. I have. Actually went there with Rightmove. And one of the interesting foundational ideas is that, like, literally, we need to understand how we're going to go and build you. And we did this as a presentation today where we say, okay, there's effectively 7 elements. So area knowledge, first of all, then market knowledge, transactional knowledge, then knowledge about the brand that you're representing in marketplace. And then we then go, well, how do we generate a lead? How do we win an instruction? And what do we do to go to sell, service, or manage the client? So each of those are individual components and they require you to actually have a process around them. So if you're a brand new estate agent, get good at the basics first before you try to do anything else. And that's a really important foundational idea that, like, well, how much does it cost to get a home loan? And how much does it cost for £1 million? And how do you earn that? And what does that look like? So then that way you really jump into that experience.
And then to flip that on its head, you've now come over and it's 10 years later. Simon Gates Estate Agent's doing amazing. But I'm an established business. So it's not like no one knows who I am. I'm 10 years in, I'm doing okay. What advice are you giving someone who's been in business 10 years?
Well, the whole conversation is that literally, are you happy with where the business is at? So are you in a position that there are some strengths that need to be leveraged? Are there strengths that need to be developed inside of the business? And what's your exit plan in 10 to 15 or 20 years from today? So are you growing future talent to become partners and shareholders and owners inside of that business? Is it about geographical expansion or is it about market penetration to drive market share? And they're two very different things because it's not by ego that I need to have more branches. Maybe I just do it from one key location and I can service the larger marketplace. When you opened your office 10 years ago, did you open in the hub or did you open in the spoke? Now, the hub is the bigger area which can service everyone. The spoke is like the a small little village. It's nice, but you can't go to the big village, if that kind of makes sense. And so it's a really important foundational idea that you're really clear about what you actually want to go to build. So I have met people that are at day 1 and have no vision for their business. I've also met people at day 10 that still have no vision for their business. But what is really important is that get the mentors in place, get the people that are around you to actually help you to want to go and grow something that's seriously great. And I don't mind what that is, but it's about choosing business models. So if you think about a 2-door car as like a very small car, quite zippy, maybe your sister would have got one when she first got a license, like that style of conversation, right the way to the big 4-wheel drive that can tow the boat and take it over to the coast. Well, that's just a business model. So what business model are you actually going for? So do you want a big business model, which you can take lots of people with you on the journey and serve thousands of customers? Or are you in a business model where you want to serve a couple of hundred and that's it? And neither of them are wrong, but you need to know what it is for your stage of life.
So in terms of that 10-year-old business as well, so they've had lots of sales come through their business over that decade. It's a really interesting stat in this country from Spectre that say that approximately 85% of buyers don't sell through the estate agent, they buy through in this country. And in terms of conveyancing, so solicitors, it's similar sort of stats. But what I found on the mortgage side of things is when mortgage brokers obviously tie people into 2 years or 5-year fixed rates, because they know when someone's coming to the end of a fixed rate, mortgage brokers, more often than not, retain the client on a remortgage, whereas a conveyancer or an estate agent doesn't know when that person's next going to move. So the estate agents in this country, in my opinion, they hit the dreaded archive button. It's kind of a past client, they've been forgotten about, user language witness protection. So what can estate agents be doing to make sure that they're not losing that 85%, and when they do sell again, they come back to them?
Yeah, so like it's a really interesting conversation, because what you're actually talking about is like foundationally, like this whole idea about lifetime value of a customer, and do you actually believe in it? So first of all, are the staff inside of your organisation, do they have a long-term view or a short-term view?
Yeah.
So if their incentive is to get an instruction this weekend, they don't have a long-term view. The secondary problem with that stat is that life has significantly increased its speed. So the speed at which you get married and the speed at which you get divorced is faster than it's probably ever been before. Now, the interesting conversation is the 15% that do use the estate agent, why they use the estate agent, who actually has the relationship? Is it the valuer or is it the negotiator? And this depends on the business modelling that you've got.
Yeah.
So if you've got a very old school traditional model where the valuer values it and does not much else, and then the negotiator works with the buyer, and then the buyer buys through who? The valuer or the negotiator?
Yeah.
Usually the negotiator.
Yeah.
And what I've found and what I've heard is that the negotiator is the role that turns over the most inside of most estate agencies.
Yeah.
So the person who's got relationship doesn't work there. So that's where the problem is. So how would we fix that? Well, let's go and get a strategy together. Yeah. And the way that we might go to fix that is we might go and have the conversation to say, okay, well, hang on a second. If you're in a position that actually you are buying a property, you also have to meet the valuer at the point of purchase. Yeah. And then the valuer then calls you 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, and then every year. Now, I'm going to take you back to 1973. A guy walks into the local news agency and he buys 12 exercise books. Labels 1 January, 1 February, 1 March, 1 April. You get the idea. Yeah. Gets the exercise book for September, opens up the exercise book and rings everyone who's ever bought with him in September and everyone who's ever sold with him in September. Yeah. Now, that guy's name was Arthur. It was actually Arthur Phegan. It was my grandfather. He was a 3rd generation estate agent, and that's how he nailed it with past clients. So for all the want of your amazing technology, your incredible AI, you still won't pick up the phone and ring a past client, because you're afraid that if I ring you and tell you that it's actually only worth 900 and you paid $1 million for it in 2022, that, oh no, I can't ring them if it's not good news.
Yeah.
It's all about you, mate. You've got to start to become about the customer and their situation. You would never make it in car sales, because the reality of it is that most cars on average sell for far less than what you pay for them the day that you drive them off the lot. Yeah. So this is actually a strategy conversation. It's a universal thing. I don't think that's a UK only stat. I would dare say that's a global stat. It feels very much similar in terms of Australia and New Zealand. And let me go an alternate view. How many instructions are you going out to try to win where you didn't sell them the house? And your number, and it'll probably be 85 or 90%. Yeah. So what you're doing, and we have a famous criminal in Australia called Ned Kelly, but you're basically being a Ned Kelly. You're going and you're stealing other people's past clients because they're underserved, and it's happening to you too because you don't have that in there. So it's a systemic issue where businesses that are really good at this actually build out customer experiences. Yeah. So if you think about Louis Vuitton and what actually goes on with like Golden Goose or any of these big brands, what they do really well is that they actually build up a customer profile. Oh, it's lovely to see you back. Tell me a bit more about that. Or hey, and so this is that whole conversation. Do you actually understand how to get someone back, or is 8 years too long in your mind? But I've had people that have sold the moment that all of a sudden they complete on a property. They buy it and they go, sorry, wrong one. Marriage is broken up. I have to sell. Okay, great. So what you've got to do is you've got to start thinking about it. Don't always look for the lead. Look for the referral. Yeah. So you might not be selling, but what are you doing with your wife, and if you're lucky enough to have kids and all of those other things that go on in life? You're meeting so many different people. You could say, hey, Josh is our man. Go and see him about that, and he'd be really good to work with.
Love it. Right, final question. Sort of said about having a business, and you said really interestingly about negotiators being the biggest turnover rate, and they're the ones meeting all the buyers. So it makes sense how the negotiators are in the business, the buyers dealt with them, the negotiator's no longer there, so the buyer goes elsewhere. So if you're hiring people in Josh Phegan, estate agents now in the UK, what are the 3 most important attributes you'd want in the people working in your team?
Well, number one, they need to make sure that they're subscribed to you and getting all of their data. all of their
nice
insights.
plug,
Did you
wasn't
like that? Look, I think a learn-it-all culture is really important as opposed to a know-it-all culture. And so it's like, how do I learn? How do I get better at that? And that's a really important part to get to a position of what we might go to call mastery. The secondary conversation, I think, is that literally the desire to actually really make sure that this is going to be a career forever. And I know that sounds really funny, but if a kid comes home from school and goes, "Oh, hey mum, hey dad, when I grow up I want to be in lettings," most parents are like, "Don't you want a real career?" But this actually is a better career because you can actually earn more money inside of a state agency than probably any other career in the world if you get really good at it. Yes. And then I think the third component is that then making sure that you're in a position that you remain hungry. And there was a book, Patrick Lencioni wrote it, and it was called The Ideal Team Player. He says, hungry, humble, and people smart. And if you just think about that, how do you demonstrate that you're still hungry to really want it? How do you make sure that you demonstrate humility? And at the same time too, how do you make sure that you're incredibly people smart? And I think that this is the greatest problem is that, fast success breeds ego, but slow success builds character. And when you hear someone go, "Oh, I just want to go back to what I was doing in 2022," yeah, but you had a 500 mile an hour wind behind you. Yeah. Anyone was able to be successful. And there's an old school saying, it's an American one: any turkey can fly in a hurricane. Yeah. And so what you got to realise, the hurricane's over. It's now time that you've got to learn about how you actually move and what it is that you actually do to be strategically brilliant around your execution.
Brilliant, love it. Right, that's been absolutely superb, Josh. It still feels surreal that we've just had that conversation. For everyone watching, listening, please do like, review, subscribe, share. And that just leaves me to say, Josh, thank you very much for being an amazing guest. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. And congratulations on booking Wembley for a podcast. Unbelievable.
Thank you, mate.